Hey folks, Bamboo here. Welcome back to our Loosen Up series, where we're going through all of the movements in the mobility routine at the beginning of this series in a little bit more depth to build a little bit more information about each body area. This week we're going to be talking about the wrists, and Oscar is here to join me. Now the wrist can move in a couple of different directions, or many different directions, and all of these directions are helpful for capoeira. However, the one that I have found in my own experience to be the most helpful for strengthening is this wrist extension position. This is the position that we load with weight when we're in a handstand or a Keita Jaheen's position. It's also the one that we use to transition between ground movements, and most importantly, if we fall or have to catch ourselves suddenly when we're off balance, that wrist extension position can get quite a lot of load. So we want to make sure that we're strengthening it to prepare for that eventuality. Now, within the routine that we have at the beginning of this video series, there are a couple of different exercises that we do for the wrists. We do these wrist circles, which you can also do with a little bit extra pressure by putting your fingers around your wrist, squeezing a little bit, and moving slowly through this range of motion. This is a kind of flossing for the joint that can help put a little extra pressure or loosen up a little bit, the muscles a little bit more. And then we went through several positions of starting to load weight onto the wrists in different positions, including moving forward to start to add a little weight in the wrist extension position, moving side to side so that we can practice lifting our fingers, also working those wrist extensors, flipping our fingers back to work the wrist flexors, pulling back here, and then stretching a little bit out the extensor muscles by flipping our hands over. At this point in my training, I tend to find these two kinds of or classes of exercise enough for my day-to-day routine. They help make my wrists feel good enough for training. However, if you're just getting started and any of these positions are uncomfortable and you're trying to build a little bit of strength, or if you're trying to increase the range of motion that you have in your wrists, there are a couple of different exercises that you can do that I have found helpful in my own practice. One of those exercises is using either a resistance band or a weight. I don't have a weight with me, so I'm going to use this parallel bar as an example weight. We want to work the wrist extensor position specifically, and then work the flexors to balance. If you have the resistance band, depending on how stretchy your band is and how long your shins are, you may be able to place the band under your toes, place your forearm on your thighs, grab the band here, and we're going to work the wrist extensors by starting in a flexed position and trying to pull our wrist all the way back. We're trying to keep everything in place, just moving the wrist up and down, and you can do this for sets of 5 or 10 or 15 depending on the strength of resistance band that you have, 2 or 3 sets, 2 to 3 times a week. To get the wrist flexors to kind of balance everything out and make sure that our wrist is equally strong in both directions, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to flip your wrist over so your palm is facing up, and then kind of curl in here. Similar idea, try to keep everything in position, and you're trying to do a nice, slow, and controlled range of motion with your elbow at about a 90-degree angle. Similar number of sets, similar number of reps, similar frequency. If the resistance band is not an option for you, either because you can't find one that's in the right level of resistance for you, or you cannot get the distance to work, you can also do this with weights. The motion is exactly the same. You would place a weight in your hand, start here, and go for the wrist extensors, trying to get a full range of motion, or for the wrist flexors, you would flip your hand over and do the same thing. Nice thing about this is you can get a lot more control in exactly the level of weight that you use, as long as you have access to some weights. The other thing that you can do that I have found helpful for myself in strengthening the wrists is getting used to loading a little bit of weight onto the wrist. So from here, I either keep my knees on the ground if I want to more easily control the amount of body weight that I'm placing, or you can start to bring your knees off the ground and add a little extra weight here. But the idea is you're going to try to straighten your arms so that you are really working the extensor muscles here, fingers facing out, and you're just going to start to load your weight over your wrist. You want to see how far you can comfortably go at a nice slow pace. Try to hold for a second once you get out, and then come back, You can do this in sets of 10 or 15, or you can do it for time. You can go into this extended position and hold here for a count of 10 or 20 or 30, trying to get used to being in that extended position. The other thing that you can do that I find helpful is going with your shoulders over your wrists and working on pushing up through your fingertips. Now, when you do this, there's a tendency to want to use your abs and your upper body to make this very easy, and then you'll start to go very fast. But really, we want to focus on not using our upper body at all, just using our wrists. You want to slow down, and if you can figure out how to do this, you'll notice that it gets much more difficult to just push through your wrists and not pull your shoulders up to take the weight off the wrist. Again, here you can do sets of between 5 and 10, depending on where you're at, and multiple sets, 2-3 sets a day, 2 to 3 times a week. All 3 of these exercises, or all 4 of these exercises, I found to be quite helpful. There's a channel called E3 Rehab, which I will post below. It has a much more in-depth video on all of the directions that the wrist can go. So depending on whether or not where your challenges are, you might want to look at that more in depth and figure out what works for you. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the wrists. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.